Welcome, everybody. This is Panama Bartholomew with the Building Decarbonization Coalition, and welcome to the BDC Presents. And today it's how to sell heat pumps to contractors and homeowners. Kind of a critical thing if we're actually going to make electrification work. And we're so excited to be joined by the father of Electrify Everything, Nate Adams, who's going to come and give this presentation today. And so we had, I believe, record-breaking attendance or registrations for this one. So we're excited that everyone else is excited about Nate coming in. Ashley, can you move me to the next slide, please? Just a little bit of information on the coalition. The coalition is a multi-sector coalition of partners. We're up to about 180 members right now. It's utilities, manufacturers of heating equipment, the design and construction community, local governments, and NGOs, all working together to eliminate emissions from the built environment. Next slide, please. And we released a roadmap focused on just California back in 2019, which feels like a decade ago now after everything we went through last year. And in there, we called for a series of targets. If California is going to have the building sector really play its role in completely eliminating emissions from the state. And so the building sector, therefore, also has to eliminate its emissions. And so we called for codes that eliminate emissions from new construction, and then a series of policies to be implemented in order to bring us to a zero carbon building sector. Inherent in that is a need that if you're going to be at carbon neutrality by 2045, which is California's goals, and your average water heater lasts about 12 years and your average furnace lasts about 15 to 18 years, we probably can't be selling any gas appliances after 2030. And so also adopted in the roadmap was the suggestion that after 2030, we only sell heat pumps for water heating and space heating. Next slide, please. Critical to achieving these numerical goals are a number of market-based goals and policy goals that we think also have to underlie that. And without these being met, we're not going to be able to meet those numerical goals. Number one is really increasing awareness across the board. Policymakers, customers, installers, et cetera. Number two, ensuring that customers actually get a good value proposition out of this, really on the life cycle, but also on the upfront and then the operating that go into that, because any one of those is going to stop a customer from moving forward on it or have a really unhappy customer. Number three, installers and builders actually have to be able to make money off of this, and preferably more money than they're making off of installing fossil fuel appliances. Number four, we need those appliance supply chains robust, ready to go with enough market certainty that they're able to ramp up their production to be able to meet the demand of a rapidly transforming market. And we need to be getting barriers to that supply chain out of the way, such as undersized electrical panels, lack of infrastructure in homes. And lastly, we need our policies to align. We need our energy efficiency policies, our clean air policies, our climate policies, our affordable housing policies to all be in alignment so that we don't have friction between those policies holding back our efforts around electrification. Can you advance it one little bit, Ashley? And this webinar series is really about goal number one, increasing awareness. This is a webinar series where we bring in global experts like Nate Adams to talk about what is the hottest thing going on in the field right now, what are the best practices, what are they seeing so that we can increase awareness among the sector, the folks that are working in this space. And so we're very happy to have Nate today. Next slide, please. Just a reminder about the webinar logistics. We're already up to 175 attendees. Everyone is muted because of that. And also some of you are a little rowdy. Please ask your questions via the chat and we will ask Nate to answer at the end of his remarks. He's got a nice long presentation, so we may not have time for all the questions, but Nate's going to provide his contact information at the end and you can personally write to him as well. This webinar is being recorded, so please act accordingly. We will report you to your parents or other family members for any inappropriate behavior that we record and send this recording to them. And then members of the coalition can access the recording on our website at any point, and all the recordings of our BDC Presents webinar series. Next slide, please. In addition to seeing all these recordings, you also get many other great benefits of being part of the coalition. We have incredibly affordable rates. We have a great community that talks about this stuff all the time and actually works on developing solutions to it. And it's really easy to join. Go to buildingdecarb.org/join. So now I'm really excited to welcome Nate Adams. I am going to switch over to him as the presenter so that he can get set up as I introduce him. So Nate, you should have presenter control now. Nate is a home performance contractor out of Ohio, but also he is really a luminary and a thought leader within the home performance space. He is an author of books. He is a extremely active tweeter. He and Donald Trump are in competition there over the last 2 years for use of the platform, but for fundamentally different approaches and reasons and outcomes. And we are very excited to have him. He's known as the House Whisperer, but also really the father of Electrify Everything. And so we're excited to have him, and please give him a warm Building Decarbonization Coalition welcome as Nate starts off his presentation. Thank you for joining us, Nate. We're excited to see what you have.
Thanks for having me, Panama. I'm really glad we got to meet in person a couple months ago. So that was cool to meet outside at Tony's house. And thanks to Tony, if you're on here, Tony Brunello, for hosting us all.
Socially distanced and with masks.
You got it. All right, how to sell heat pumps to contractors and homeowners. So this ended up taking up more of my life than I meant it to. But it was good to kind of pull things together, and I was going to try and basically break down 10 years of experience into an hour or 45 minutes or so. We'll just start by talking about some of the projects we've done. So we figured out how to, in a fully market-based way, electrify existing houses in cold climates. And there's not a lot of people that have figured this out. There's only one other one that I know of, which is Robert Brearley in Portland, Oregon, Revival Energy. So this was a pretty tricky thing to figure out, and the whole time we were doing this. So this is the 10th gas meter that we pulled off, and we weren't doing this because we were just trying to serve a few local clients. We had scalability in mind the whole time, but that turned out to be a problem. So as we figured out how to do these advanced projects, we figured out that the model just doesn't scale. There's too much soft costs for getting into these houses. We managed to reduce it to zero, but that was because I had a ton of time in creating content. That's part of why I'm here. And it also requires very high knowledge levels. So basically it requires Michael Jordan level talent to do well. And that's not scalable. And that was kind of a bummer to figure out. So we had to pivot. And it made us realize that we really need to leverage an existing contractor network. And that is one that's naturally already in homes, which is the HVAC industry. So HVAC contractors are in homes more than any other contractor, and they're oftentimes in homes multiple times a year because they're doing tune-ups and seasonal checks. The problem there is that many, if not most, HVAC contractors are not great at either selling or installing heat pumps. There's a few of them on the call here, I believe, that are actually good at doing this. So welcome, guys. So thinking of Chris Wisniewski in particular, and Jeff Howard as well. But anyways, a lot of them are not good at this, or they are actually afraid of heat pumps, particularly in cold climates, because they have had bad experiences in the past. So old generation heat pumps, they could work just fine, but they're a little bit particular on how they're installed. And so you have to be careful with them. So in general, they have the reputation like 1980s diesels. They're noisy, they're loud, and they lead to bad experiences. So by the way, Panama, the 5 goals, I should have seen those, and I probably have a number of times before. Oh, that's hilarious. My wife is texting me. So we have to switch that mentality. And to be able to do that, we need a process to do it. And here's the process. We've come to call it HVAC 2.0. It's been through several iterations at this point, and it's predicated on 2 questions. The first one is, are there comfort problems to solve? And if no, you just do a free quote. and you can offer the client multiple different options. By the way, heat pumps can be in here, so none of these options kicks out electrification. It's just that it works better usually. You get better experiences for everyone involved if you go the other path. So the other path is called a comfort consult, and it's basically the first half of an energy audit. And what that's trying to answer is HVAC likely to solve the problems that the client wants to solve? And if yes, it is, you do a tailored replacement. We suspect most people are going to go that way. And if it's not, you do the comprehensive planning process, which is the advanced process that we had developed. So the easiest way to look at this is the free quote is like a clinic. So say a kid gets hurt at school. School nurse is free quote. Here's a Band-Aid, go back to class. Comfort consult is a trip to the hospital. Most of the time, the kid's going to be fine. They'll run a couple of tests and they're good and they send them home. If they are really hurt or really sick, that's what the comprehensive planning process is for. That's like the ICU. So our original problem was we had developed an intensive care unit, but we did not have a hospital or a clinic to go with it. So now we have those. And the great news is this is working. So here's some screenshots from various groups of the first round of guys talking about their experience. So we're early, it's still alpha phase, but it's going to work. It's absolutely going to work. We just have to keep going. Now, all that said, like I said, I have a bunch of content here, so we're going for a ride. So buckle up, fair warning. All right, so in figuring out how to do these electrifications, we found that this is what the path to electrification looks like. It's this very, very narrow path with drop-offs on either side that'll kill you. So we have found a whole lot of the problems here. So you can have issues in the sales process, you can have issues in install, you can have issues in specification, you can have issues in commissioning after the job is done, you can have both contractor and client relationship problems. There are a lot of pitfalls. So we're not going to say that this is the only path to electrification at scale, but we've spent a decade finding this one, and it really is this narrow. So if you see me giving you a hard time for one thing or another on Twitter, I'm probably thinking about this, and you may not be realizing it, but you may be pushing us off the cliff. So this is the way to think of electrification. What I want to do here today, though, is I want to take a first principles look at electrification. So this is what we've basically done for a decade, which is you go to the end and you come back, and then you work back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until you get as many of the rough edges polished off as you can. So we're going to look at single family residential electrification. And it's really important to note here that I don't think we have left any stone unturned, and we have burned all of the sacred cows. And hopefully all of you have found this sort of thing helpful in your work as well. You always have to question everything, and we've done our best to question absolutely everything, and it's been very, very difficult figuring this out. It's a great way to not make a ton of money for 10 years. All right, the biggest lesson coming out of this, so we're going to do a couple of themes at first, and then we're going to dive into a bunch of individual issues. So the biggest theme is that residential electrification has two key parties. These are the only ones that matter. They are the homeowners and they are the contractors. Both of them have to be convinced. And the reason they're so key, it's pretty obvious, but homeowners are the ones writing the checks and contractors are the ones selling and doing the work. So without both of these parties doing what they do, electrification just doesn't happen. So this is where the focus should be. And I don't know if anybody else here is a big fan of The Princess Bride, but I love this scene. So you're a fool, you're falling victim to one of the classic blunders. Electrification is a land war. We have 105,000 HVAC contractors across the US that have to be convinced this is a good idea, so they don't drag their feet. And we have 100 million homeowners that we have to convince as well. So imagine trying to take over the US by land. That's what we have to do. The good news is it's doable. The bad news is, like I said, it's a narrow path. And this is a term that I would love to see come into electrification parlance, which is the church of the kitchen table. This is how we've come to look at the kitchen table transaction. So homeowners and contractors, their interest rule above all. So sorry manufacturers, sorry utilities, sorry programs, you don't matter. The only thing that matters is the kitchen table. And I wanted to give you guys an earworm on this too. So the church of the kitchen table, and nothing else matters. Now, at the kitchen table, how we want to think about it, and you're going to see this theme through the rest of the presentation, we want to think about adding friction or adding grease to transactions. So the question that I think we should all ask with whatever we are trying to do when it comes to residential electrification is, does this add friction or grease to the kitchen table transaction? That's the question. And what's underlying that is, will it drive excellent experiences? And Panama, you mentioned this in the intro. We need contractors to make more money, if at all possible, doing this. We need them to have excellent experiences, and we need homeowners to have excellent experiences. And if we do that, this is far easier to scale. So hopefully everyone is familiar with the Net Promoter Score idea. So it's the scale of 0 to 10. Are you not likely to recommend, or are you extremely likely to recommend? If we can't deliver 9 and 10 Net Promoter experiences with whatever we're doing it wrong. So we need to either not do that or adjust what we're doing so that we can provide that. And what you get out of that, so you get maybe Panama's going to send this to my mom, we'll see. So I got a sexy slide in here. But excellent experiences lead to fast growth with low or no marketing spend. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be a guerrilla war. So we are not going to be a well-financed bunch of redcoats. We are going to be the revolutionaries jamming glass and whatever we can into our muskets and using that. So Tesla's done an amazing job of this. I mean, you may not love Elon Musk, but the guy can get PR like crazy. They don't spend anything on marketing, and yet they're seeing very fast growth. That's truly remarkable. And we can do the same thing. It's not quite as easy though, because we're not selling a cool product like a car. But the better the experiences we can deliver, the more likely we are to scale without a ton of effort. So again, keep viewing it this way. Now, the path. Let's look at 3 different points of view of this path. So I want to start at ground level, because that's what we know best. That's what we are developing out. And then I want to look at this problem from 30,000 feet. So basically we're talking like a market level. And then from the moon backed off, looking at everything very long term, very far off. So ground level, there's 5 different things I want to discuss. So I want to talk about asking versus telling, education and how to do that, increasing value, because in general, electrification is more expensive than standard methods, part of why it hasn't taken off. Need to talk about variable speed HVAC, because that is the magic in a whole bunch of different ways. And then we want to talk about the supply houses, because they're going to have a big role to play here. And a lot of these we're going to hear at ground level, and then we'll tackle again when we back off. So education, this is really important. Contractors and homeowners both need to be open to heat pumps. And this is a decent education process oftentimes, and you can't do this quickly. So easiest analogy to think of is, imagine walking into a bar and you see someone that you're interested in talking to. Right then you need to make a choice. Do you want to make it a one-night stand, or do you want to make it a relationship? And we need to be thinking about relationships, because this is not about the hard sell ever. This is about educating people and then offering them options. So long-term relationships, think about that. And when it comes to educating consumers, we found this to be super effective. Everyone intuitively understands the HVAC in their car. And we're all used to using it almost every day, a lot less than the last year. But this is a really good way to introduce people to how residential HVAC works, because automotive is frankly so far superior. And so I'll just run you through the basics of this really quickly so that you're up to speed. So your car has this dial where you can put in a whole lot of cool, a whole lot of heat, or a little bit of either one. So when you get in the car, like, you don't run it at full on hot or full on cold all the time. Once the car warms up or cools off, you back it off. The problem is 85% of residential HVAC is single stage, which means it's either on or it's off. There's no in the middle. That's really difficult to deliver comfort with. It's like trying to take a shower with a 10-gallon bucket being dumped over your head rather than taking a 5-minute shower. So here's what the main types of residential HVAC look like. So on the left, you can see the single stage, the on-off. The next one over, 2-stage, is basically 1 stage warmed over. So it will back off to 2/3 of full throttle, but not anymore. So imagine driving a car where your option is either full throttle or 2/3 throttle. That's still not great. You need to be able to have just a little bit to tip in, or else you can't drive smoothly. So if you want to provide good comfort and basically drive the house smoothly, you want to have modulating equipment. The lower end modulating usually drops to about 40% of full capacity. The best stuff drops to 25. There's a few that are down to 17 at this point. But this is really critical. We need modulating variable speed HVAC. This leads to far better comfort. It's also way better for the grid because it starts soft. It doesn't go dong when it turns on. It doesn't go and pull thousands of watts. It pulls less than full throttle. And then they run almost all the time at low levels, which can be really useful as well. So variable speed is key. This is part of HVAC 101. So the graphics I was just showing, this is a free guide that anyone here can go download and send it out. You don't need to pay. You don't need to do any attribution or anything like that because it shows where it's from. Please send this file out to as many people as will listen. This helps educate consumers about how there are different types of HVAC and there's different things that HVAC needs to do. And this opens them up to higher end, more expensive equipment, and it builds value, which is really critical. We'll come back around to that. All right, on the contractor side, for education, a big piece of this is really having a guild. It's having a place to have discussions. And we've had a lot of luck with this group. So Facebook has been super useful. So this is the HVAC 2.0 Advanced Discussion for Comfort Troubleshooters group. Lots and lots and lots of discussion going on here, which is wonderful. And we've been shifting mindsets because when I first dug into this back in about 2017 into the HVAC world, man, it got so much pushback about heat pumps, and there's far less now. In fact, here's something that just posted yesterday. So this is Tim. He is in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area, and this is out of the Electrify Everything Facebook group. So we talk a lot about removing gas meters, and he's out there. He managed to pull an oil tank, or well, the oil tank might still be there, but it's empty. So he's moving from an oil furnace to a mini split heat pump. And yes, that's a tight install for anyone who's technically oriented. He said it just barely meets specs. That's a tight spot to put one though. But it's cool. We have lots of contractors out there now talking about using heat pumps, and it's becoming what the cool kids do, which is hilarious because I have never been cool in my entire life. But here we are. Not saying that I'm cool, but it's funny to be a leader. Now, this is a critical piece though. This little image here is from Chicago, Navy Pier, if I remember correctly. Most residential HVAC is replaced in an emergency. So if it is not in stock, it doesn't get installed. So this is critical. Supply houses need to consume a great deal of our thought, particularly on the policy side. Now let's talk about telling versus asking. So this is really friction versus grease under another name. So we'll talk about homeowners to begin. This is not what you want to do. This is not always be closing. This is not ramming stuff down people's throats. This is long-term relationship building and education and helping them understand why things benefit them. So don't do this. This is not the path. What we do want to do is ask them a bunch of questions. This shows that we care. And for the most part, the guys we're working with, they really care. They want to do a good job. Fundamentally, most HVAC contractors are good mechanics. We just need to inject a little engineering into their thinking, and man, are they powerful because they have so many of the skills we already need. And when it comes to homeowners, what they are looking for typically falls into a few buckets. So you have to ask individually to see what matters, but they are usually looking for better comfort, better air quality, better health in their house, or moisture control. That's the main things that things fall into. And when you ask them, this is the Venn diagram that we developed for the Comfort Consult. So you want to find out what are their goals, what does their house need, and what is their budget for solving those problems. And the budget is not so much about what is it going to cost, it is what is it worth. It's what is the value to them. And that's really critical to understand. So again, here's the basic process. Are there comfort problems to solve? Then they do a free quote or a comfort consult. Comfort consult being the first half of an energy audit. And then if HVAC's likely to solve the problem, they can just change the equipment out. And if it's not, they do the comprehensive planning process, which is the second half of an energy audit. And it's really quite a bit deeper than this typical energy audit. And that leads to those projects. Now, I keep showing this slide. Again, it's critical. I'm trying to, this is inception is what I'm trying to do to some extent. I like this stuff to be in your brains. But when I talk about the path being narrow, we have the path defined. So I showed you the simple version of the HVAC 2.0 process. This is the full version. So any one of these stops, we came to view it like a subway map. A subway map is a wonderful way to represent very complex systems in a way that's pretty quickly understandable. And so this is how we came up with showing this. And you can see we got the free quote. There's a comfort consult and there's a comprehensive planning process, and there's different paths between all of them. So just know that this program is pretty well built out at this point. Not that it's perfect, not that it doesn't have rough edges, but we're mainly in the refining stage. Now, the comfort consult involves a blower door test. So I mentioned Robert Brearley earlier. He just made this little meme yesterday. It made me laugh, so I threw it in the slideshow. So solving comfort and air quality issues without a blower door. You really can't figure stuff out if you don't do diagnostics. And on the right, that's what the blower door looks like. That's my blower door. That's actually out in California. That's at Julia Piper's house. And what this leads to is that prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And so we always want to offer people diagnosis. They don't have to do it, but they should be offered diagnostics. Blower door has a massive effect on load calculations, which we'll talk about again in a second here. Now, HVAC 2.0, it's important to note, this is steeped in building science. That's where my partner and I come from. So we are big on this stuff, but we also want to make sure that it's actually scalable and gets injected into the market, and it has not been successful thus far doing that. Now, a different way to look at the process. So we expect most people are just going to do the free quote, which is 70% or so, and about 30% will go towards the comfort consult. We're beginning to see this as it's being used by the guys. Once people do a comfort consult, we're seeing the vast majority of them are just replacing equipment with something that's tailored. So it's right-sized and it's got the features on it to help solve problems that client wants to solve. Only a few, so we're thinking 3% tops, are going to go for the comprehensive planning process and the deep retrofits. We're going to talk about that more later. The only way that this number is going to come up is through policy. We've got to inject resale value or efficiency into resale value. All right, important note here. Someone on Twitter was like, hey, wait, free quote, then they don't get offered electrification. Every path here leads to a piece of equipment being sold, and every path should have a heat pump option in it. We're training the contractors to do that. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, doesn't mean everybody's going to do it, but these should all offer heat pumps. Now let's move to the contractor side of things and telling them what to do. Boy, if you want to raise hackles, tell a contractor what to do. I have never seen a group of people with a screw you, I won't do what you tell, or I won't do what you tell me kind of mindset. And it's very much like this GIF. somebody used this and I just loved it. So this is Bender from Futurama pulling down a sign that says boating prohibited, folding it up into a boat and sailing away. So be very, very careful in how you word and do any bans on the existing side of things. So new construction, it's not that hard to just electrify. It's especially in California. But on residential retrofits, it can be pretty challenging. And you want to be careful not to engage this side of human nature. So one of our guys, he's down in Louisiana, he's doing electrifications left and right. But he said, if you tell me that I can't do a furnace, man, I'm going to find furnaces and I'm going to put them in. So this is a guy who's actively doing electrification. But if we aren't careful on how we word things, we're going to create friction, tick them off, and make our job much harder. Now, instead, if you ask people to share information and you create competitions, you get drag racing. And this has been so fun to watch. So we're creating competitions on ballsy sizing. Who will size the smallest piece of equipment for the most square feet? Who is delivering the lowest static pressures, which lower fan energy and make equipment last longer and it's quieter. So we're creating all of these competitions. So we're leveraging human nature. So it's the opposite side of the screw you, I won't do what you tell me. And now it's like, I want to show off at how good my work is. And this has been really fun to watch happen. So here's one example that just happened yesterday. So we talk a lot about blower doors and sizing correctly for HVAC. And this is really important, by the way, because heat pumps are smaller than furnaces. So the smallest commonly available furnace is 60,000 BTUs. The largest commonly available heat pump is 60,000 BTUs. So, but we find that most houses are okay getting into heat pump territory, but you still want to size it correctly. And there's a lot of risk, which can create a lot of friction if you don't size accurately and you need a blower door. So here's Jenry Garcia. He's a very good contractor down in the Miami area. And he just tested a house the other day and came up with a very, very leaky house, a 9,000 blower door. So if he had just used the software and selected loose, which is the worst option they give you, what the house tested out at is 3 times leakier than what the software will let you do it with a simple input. So he would have chosen the wrong piece of information and very likely ended up with an upset customer. So I love that he posted this. So thanks, Jenry. And so what he was driving home here is a point that we keep making, the whole plus or minus 70% thing, because load calcs are only accurate plus or minus 70% without a blower door and energy use. So he drove home the point that that's inaccurate if you don't have a blower door. And what he's doing, remember, HVAC contractors at heart are generally mechanics. They like going in and finding something that's broken, figuring out what it is, changing the part, making it work. They Jones on fixing stuff. So they Jones on having tools. So this is creating a want for blower doors, which is awesome because it's the only tool that you need for 2.0. Now, if you ask contractors, so same side of thing for homeowners, what they want in general is easy sales, profitable work, few callbacks, because callbacks are expensive, and that's also hurting net promoter score. And they want happy clients who refer people to them. So these are the themes, not that there aren't more things, but these are the themes. And I'd like to introduce one of the guys. So this is Reedy Ward. He is one of the kindest guys you will ever want to meet. He's also a heck of a sales guy. So he puts up almost $2 million a year in sales, which is substantial. That's definitely on the high side of the curve. And he's out of Aberdeen, North Carolina. He works at Comfort Services. So really key thing here, 2020 was hard on his leads. He was down a third on his leads, but his revenue did not go down. And he started using the 2.0 process early in 2020, and he attributes most of the success to that. Now on free quotes, his closing ratio is up a little bit. We base this system on the Sandler sales process, which is, again, it's about offer and decline. It's educating and offering options. So he's noticed his closing ratio go up a little bit. So he's up from 46 to 52%, with average jobs being $10,000. And that's pretty high, especially for that market. So Reedy is a bit of a superstar, but take a look at the Comfort Consult numbers. 82% closing ratio. That's unheard of. So 3 quotes is kind of standard. So typical closing ratio in the HVAC industry is between 25 and 30%. 82 is off the charts. And then look at the size of the job, $16,000. It's 60% larger. And this is about what we're seeing. We're seeing 70 to 80% closing ratios for the Comfort Consult, and we're seeing 50% ticket bumps. So when it comes to making more money, this leads to that. And you also get happier clients, but you have to build value. Now, another way to look at this, which is really key from a numbers perspective, is revenue per lead. So Reedy is putting up about $5,000 in revenue per lead for a free quote, which is pretty good. But check out the Comfort Consult. Because of that high closing ratio, $13,000 revenue per lead, almost triple. This is the sort of thing that can actually shift the economics of the industry and could force everyone to move this direction. Which could be pretty cool. And that's, I mean, you want, if you're going to replace one regime with another, you want the new one to be 10x better. And regime is probably not the best word to use right now, but a one product or solution with another. All right, ground level. I need to talk about increasing value. I touched on this. So basic furnaces are $3,000 to $4,000 installed in most of the US. So this is not really California because typically duct systems get replaced at the same time. And then it's another $3,000 or $4,000 for the air conditioner. So in general, a complete decent install of a single stage, which is a mediocre piece of equipment for heating and cooling, is $6,000 to $8,000. High-end HVAC is typically in the $10,000 to $15,000 range without ductwork. So we don't need to build $10,000 to $15,000 in value. We need to build the difference between the 6 and 8 and the 10 and 15. So 2 to 9,000. That's what we need to do. And how do we do that? We ask customers what do they want to solve, what bothers them in their house, and we go from there. So for reference, $50 a month for 15 years at 4% money buys $7,000. So if we can find $50 a month worth of value, that can usually bump us into high-end stuff if we're talking HVAC only. So that's working through all these pieces here, asking versus telling, education, value, variable speed, and supply houses. So let's zoom out some more and look at this problem from 30,000 feet. We need to talk about 2 clocks, the adoption curve, how there's 85% emergency replacements, and allowing fuel switching. So here's a scary statistic. Every 6 seconds, a new residential HVAC system starts up. So during this webinar, we are going to lose 600 opportunities until 2035 or 2040 because HVAC is usually replaced every 15 or 20 years. So tick-tock. The good news is 40 million US homes are already electric. That is thanks to the Southeast and Northwest. So we have 60 million to do. Once we get to where we're replacing every system with a heat pump, we're still going to need about 20 years to work through all the building stock. And depending on the climate, this can be a lot harder. So if we start today, we've got 2 million a year that we need to do to finish in 2050. But that's not the game that we're playing. We're frankly going to be lucky to begin in 2030. This is not an easy thing to move to. So we need to do 3 million a year at that point. So here's what the 2 clocks are that we think about. So the first one is to ramp to 100% replacement. So every single new HVAC system that goes in is either a heat pump or has a heat pump in it. It could be a hybrid heat pump on top of a furnace. I don't love that, but that's realistically going to happen in northern climates. So once we get there, then we start the 20-year clock to getting to 100% heat pumps. But what we should really be focusing on is how do we get this ramp as fast as we possibly can. So 2030, that is our personal goal to do with basically HVAC 2.0 alone. It will be great to have help on that, but that's our goal. All right, adoption curve is another critical thing. So hopefully this is going to be review to a lot of people, but this is how new technologies get out there. So you got the early market and then you have the mainstream, and you have to be able to cross this chasm and create good products. So the issue is these folks, the early market, and these folks, the mainstream, they speak really different languages, really different. So the first group, the innovators, the tech enthusiasts, they are into ooh shiny. And I personally am here on a bunch of stuff. I had GPS and satellite radio in 2004. And up behind me, I have a whole bunch of air quality monitors because I was really excited about those coming out. But those are the really early people. The next group are the early adopters. They like to have things before their friends in general. But the mainstream, they just want stuff that is demonstrably better and easy to buy. That's really all they care about. And worse, the mainstream market, they hate early adopter language and arguments. It's like trying to convert somebody from one side of the political aisle to the other. Like it's just, you aren't going to get there. They hate that language, which means we need to design for the mainstream if we're going to stop that first clock as soon as we can. And we need to design for both homeowners and contractors. So, or this doesn't happen. So let's get that first clock to stop. Let's get to 100% when things are being replaced. So again, narrow path. And I need to stop here and be kind of hard on everybody. So if hopefully this is obvious at this point, but the time for pilots and the time for case studies is over. We've used the time. We're out of time. We have to design for the mainstream or we'll fail. We are not going to get where we want things to go. And the way we do this is by asking homeowners what they want to solve. So we're seeing in our practice that we can pull in early and late majority clients because in Energy Smart's practice, we can provide them a complete solution from start to finish. If they want to fix something, we can ask what they're trying to figure out, diagnose it, create a treatment plan, execute the treatment plan, and then make sure the treatment plan worked. We can do all of that. And so that is built into 2.0, but that is obviously only a few % of what's probably going to happen. Now, little comic relief after that. This is actual footage of a homeowner with a broken air conditioner on a hot day. And this is, again, 85% of replacements. And this is a real problem because 85% of residential HVAC is single stage, and single stage leads to poor experiences in general. So we need to be able to shift this. So for starters, remember Chicago. It's the third largest city in the US, and you cannot buy a heat pump in Chicago. They are not stocked. You can go to Illinois, or sorry, you can go to Wisconsin, you can go to Indiana, but you can't get them in Illinois. That's crazy. We've got to shift that so the right stuff is in stock. To do that, we need to educate consumers so that they are planning ahead instead of waiting to the last minute. So they need to be able to pick up the phone and be like, hey, Bob, you know, that system we talked about, air conditioner's broken, when can you get it in? That's how we need to do that sort of thing. And contractors are the primary educators in this. So we need to get them up to speed in both education and sales process. And the last piece from 30,000 feet is to allow fuel switching. This is not my thing. Hopefully there's a whole bunch of wonks on here. This is your thing, and you've already been getting started in California. Thank you. Keep going. Fuel switching needs to be freaking easy or we're in trouble. So let's make this happen. So that's 30,000 feet. Let's back up again to the moon. So this is looking really big picture. So cold states are key. So whatever you all do in California, it would be drastically preferable if whatever you pull together works in cold climates as well, because that's where a whole lot of this needs to get done. We need to deal with resale value. We need to change production over. The good news is pretty much all the production that we need for space heating and cooling is there already. We just need to change it around. And the manufacturers are not going to fight that. We need to have cheap electricity, please. So the more you can do that, the better the math works. And then carbon pricing would be wonderful to have. I'm not really holding my breath, but I would love to have that. So Energy Institute at Haas just put these two graphs out the other day, and they're wonderful. So this is electrification, residential electrification in 1950, and you can see there's almost nothing. You know, only Nevada had a little bit of it. Meanwhile, in 2018, look at the southeast rather, and the northwest. That is spectacular. They're over 50%. By the way, California, guys, what the hell? Like, you guys are sucking it up there. Um, but cold states are really the key here now. So when it comes to electrification, I mean, this is all relatively warm climates. So here's the US climate zones, 1, 2, and 3. Basically, that's heavy electrification in that range. We can get into climate zone 4 quite easily. And with the inverter heat pumps that are out, the cold climate heat pumps, we can totally tackle climate zone 5, and we can do 6. In some cases, shell upgrades are much more necessary in climate zone 6. Heat pumps really start to struggle below 0, and so climate zone 6 spends a fair amount of hours in the year below 0. So that's where things start to get more challenging. But climate zone 5 we can cover. And there are 9 states, looking at EIA data, where they are 48% of residential gas use. So they're New York, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Colorado, and Missouri. So look at these right here with relatively low electrification. This is half of the gas usage in the US. So we need to be able to do cold climate states. Meanwhile, California, come on, your climate zones 2 and 3 with a little bit of 4. Come on, let's get rolling. So I'm glad that you guys are doing it, but it wouldn't be right if I didn't bust your chops a little bit. Another big issue that we need to work through, and I'm going to try and keep this brief, is resale value, and we would really like help solving this. So here's the deal. Typical building shell projects, if you are going to electrify an old leaky house, you probably need to spend between $10,000 and $40,000 to do an effective building shell retrofit. So that's insulation and air sealing. That's where I cut my teeth. The issue is $10,000 to $40,000 is a huge chunk of the housing value in a lot of areas. So again, we're looking through this area. These are all pretty low housing cost areas. So New York is expensive, Massachusetts is expensive, and then California, good Lord, is it expensive out there. Your sheds are $500,000. We just spent time out there. We were coming home. One of our realtor friends posted a $600,000 house. We're like, oh, that's not bad. It was 5,000 square feet. Very different here in Cleveland. But we need to be able to create some resale value here, because we're asking people to spend a big chunk. Usually our projects are between 10 and 20% of home value. The problem is there is no predictable resale value bump, even though the houses get less expensive to operate. And we'd really, really like to see that shift. So if we can publish energy use, and it needs to be a hard metric. Energy use is best because it's not squishy. You can apply a bunch of different numbers on it, cost and net present value calculations. But the usage itself is really hard. And that can be converted to cash flow, and cash flow is what banks lend against. It's important to note here, markets usually arrive at value by looking at the average and then adding or subtracting. So anybody here who sold their car, you go to Kelley Blue Book or wherever, and they tell you if the house, or if the car is in good condition, it's worth $10,000. If it's in fair condition, it's $8,500. If it's really good condition, it's $11,000, something like that. And we'd really like to have that sort of thing happen for efficiency, because if we're going to get these to scale, we need to do that. And we suspect that once the value is visible and high confidence, so there needs to be enough data for the banks to be comfortable here, efficiency monetization may be almost instant. And this is going to make things a lot easier. Now, we built a little calculator for this where you put in what your energy use is and then what the cost is, and then it will compare through a Department of Energy data set what the actual or what the average cost is, and then you can see what the difference is. This is the net present value is not working right on this particular one, but we can go from 4 numbers, which is zip code, fuel usage, electric usage, and shoot, my mind is totally blank. Oh, square footage, and come up with this calculation. So we'd love to see this sort of thing happen. And here's why this matters. Remember how I said that only 3% are probably going to go for the CPP, the comprehensive planning process? That's because to do that, you need to be planning to live in a house long enough to enjoy the benefits. You need to have the money to do it, and you need to have problems to solve that are worth spending that money. So it's necessarily going to be a fairly small group. Now, if we can have predictable resale value and you can recoup a chunk of the cost on the other side, that would be wonderful. By the way, doing this will make residential solar such an easy sell. Because I'd like to do it on my house, but the math is if I sell this house in 5 years, I'll probably lose $20,000 over what I put into a solar system, and it's just not attractive. All right, another important note here is if we don't do the retrofits to tighten and air seal and insulate houses, we can do hybrids, which is a heat pump and a furnace. That can reduce gas usage by 50 to 90%. By the way, this is $200 more at the supply house. So an air conditioner and a heat pump is usually somewhere between $200 and $300 more expensive for the same model. So that can be 50 to 90% reduction in gas usage. But the problem is this still requires the infrastructure, and the goal should be to get rid of the infrastructure. Another good piece of news, the production already exists to do this. So this is a ton of info on one slide, sorry, but this is RE numbers, which is one of the industry groups. Warm air furnaces, about 3.4 million a year are sold in the US. Air conditioners and heat pumps, there's 8.5 million. This is what you want to focus on. Most of the air conditioners and heat pumps are air conditioners. We need to turn all of those into heat pumps. So one thought, this could be done at a federal level, would be to kick the manufacturers a couple $100 per unit. So once they go to all heat pumps, give them $200 a unit, something like that. A bunch of different ways that could be worked. But that would shift it so that everything made is a heat pump, which would that would get us to that 100% instantly, and probably for something like 10 billion bucks. It wouldn't be that much money. The other piece is cheaper electricity would be great, because running with a heat pump is generally marginally more expensive than using a heat pump. Than a furnace. It's typically just a couple hundred a year, but the more we can make that math work, the better. So if we can get to 10 cents kilowatt hours, that would be wonderful. And thanks to Scott Luft for putting this together. All right, so that's the moon, and good, we're not too much left. So we need to deal with cold states, resale value, changing production over, electricity needs to get cheaper, and carbon pricing I didn't dive into, but fee and dividend would be really wonderful, even if it's difficult. So hopefully this helps a little bit, so zooming in and out on the problem. Now, here's the tricky part though, all of this stuff needs to get tackled. So these are all the different items that we talked about. So this is why it's such a narrow path, because all that stuff needs to be done and done well together for this to work. The good news is we have been thinking about this a lot. And so HVAC 2.0 we've built so that it can on its own probably do all these things. Like, it'd be nice to accelerate it. But near term, we've got education in hand. We know how to do asking versus telling. We think we're going to be moving on the 2 clocks. We can increase value up front to homeowners. We already work in cold states. It's where we cut our teeth. We're good at selling variable speed equipment. We are considering the adoption curve. We can sell to anyone, wherever they are on the adoption curve, and we're working through the emergency replacement problem. So near term, we think we can get a lot of those in hand. Long term, we're going to be collecting energy use. So we're going to be able to have the data set to show resale value. We're going to be moving supply houses to move in more heat pumps, and we are browbeating the manufacturers as well. What we absolutely can't do, though, is the policy side. So cheap electricity, we really can't do anything about. Fuel switching, nope. And carbon pricing, nope. So the good news is what we're doing, and I don't say this to be cocky or anything like that. We've been trying to figure this out for years and pull this together. A lot of this we think we can do almost solo, but that's not the preference. Now, top-down help needed. Again, watch the kitchen table. But near term, if the manufacturers and the supply houses could manufacture and stock more heat pumps, that would be wonderful. Help out with fuel switching, help out with getting energy use published. And the education side, maybe, but be very careful with this. Like one example is be gentle on talking too much about climate for electrification, because that is really more of an early adopter argument. That's usually not a mainstream market mover. And even for early adopters, it's often not worth that much money. And so you want people to do it and do it well so that they get a good experience and they tell everybody else about it. So education, be cautious. You can steal anything we have out there. Please use it. Long term, help out with electricity pricing, carbon pricing, and in cold states. Now, I know this is a lot, so WTF, Nate. This is so complicated. What do we do? Remember how I said it was a narrow path? Let's try and just hit the high points here. So the church of the kitchen table, this is the key to electrification. Create grease and not friction. Put contractors and homeowners first. Look at what they need, what their incentives are, serve those. And the question you want to ask in anything that you were thinking about doing is, does this create friction or grease at the kitchen table? If it creates friction, either don't do it or shift it so that you can turn it into grease. The other big point is we don't have time to waste. We've got to move to mainstream. We need to design for mainstream. So even if we aren't doing mainstream yet, we need to have the program set up to do it. And the good news is what we've been building here, this can do 80% or so of the work. Again, not saying this to be cocky. This is a genuine belief at this point. We've built this, so this will move things. We're moving the industry already. But we would much prefer to do this with help. We'd like to accelerate it. And again, there's a look at the path. So if you want to help, there's a couple things you can do. So we have made accounts free at hvac20.com, and you'll get a bunch of homework so you can see the educational side of things, and then you can watch what's going on. You can pay for a subscription if you want, and that's just nice to have the support. Think of it like Patreon, if you will. Ask us about white labeling. We're not quite ready for this yet, but if you want to pull this into your program and put another label on it, that's going to be a possibility in the near future. And then I am just about to put up a course at electrifyeverything.net, and that's going to be for everyone personally, because that's going to dive deep into the HVAC side, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that you're going to need to be ready for, because most contractors are not going to be happy to do this. You're going to have to find contractors. You're going to have some fights. So that is basically helping you put on the armor so you can go into that fight, because don't go in without armor, you will lose. So just to sum up, big takeaways. Church of the kitchen table is really, really critical. Hopefully everybody can start using that phrase. So focus on the homeowner and contractor needs above all else. We need to get that first clock to stop. How do we get to 100% penetration with all new installs need to have a heat pump in them? Because then we start the 20-year clock after that. And the last one is we are pretty much all early adopters that are here. So we are talking to the mainstream. Remember, we are going to be pissing them off if we talk about things that we care about. So use their language instead. Ask them what they're trying to fix. Move slowly. It's a long relationship. So these are the key things to keep in mind. And with that, let's go win this land war. Maybe it's a classic blunder, but I think we can actually win this. I really, really do. Not saying it's easy, but there is a path. And with that, ready for a couple of questions.
Awesome. You deliver. I'm sure you deliver to your customers, and you delivered today, Nate. So really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Lots of great questions. I've tried to answer a bunch of them because I know we're going to have limited time. Most likely, I would say write to Nate at his contact information right here to have your questions answered. But one thing that did come through a lot is a bunch of Chicago area people objected to your Chicago.
Oh, good.
And
so
said,
there are, which supply house then? I want to know because I keep asking there.
All right, please write to Nate about the supply house and he'll update his presentation.
Yes.
A lot of stuff about cold weather and advice on how to install heat pumps in cold weather appropriately. So could you just spend maybe 30 seconds about best practices around how to make sure that heat pumps work in cold weather, and then we'll sign off.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out which way to tackle that because there's
installation, I think, particularly
the install side.
Yep.
Yeah.
On the other side.
So that part can be challenging, and that's not my strongest point, to be frank, because I'm not an installer. But the trickiest part there is usually getting the refrigerant charge somewhere close to correct. And you can only be sure about the refrigerant charge when the weather is warm and it's in air conditioning mode. I don't fully understand why, but I know that's the case. So try do your best on the refrigerant charge. Um, and then you also want to set them up so that you don't run too much resistance, because the stock settings in most equipment will lean it towards using more resistance than it needs to.
Great. And Edward Louis had some comments on here too. He said, get that thing out of put it up on a little bit of a pedestal, get it out of the snow, and then put an awning over it to protect it. And that should help keep some of the ice off. A number of folks asked about the recording for this. Members of the coalition can get a recording of this presentation. If you go to buildingdecarb.org/join, it's a very great organization to join, if I do say so myself. And we're happy to share it with you, and all of the other wonderful presentations from experts like Nate can be found there. We are out of time. Please write to Nate if you have questions. Please join HVAC 2.0 in order to be able to continue this movement. And please visit websites like switcheson.org or cleanenergyliveshere.org to be able to find out information about not only why to electrify, but contractors that can actually help you electrify that have already been adopting some of the methods that Nate talked about today. Nate, you're amazing. You always are. Thank you so much for today. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Keep up the good work out there. Go electrify everything, and we'll see you on the next webinar next month. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.